I was only 8 years old the first time I stole something. It wasn't a grand robbery or some clever mischief. It was just a few coins taken from a small tin box in my mother's cupboard. I remember the moment so clearly, as if it's playing in slow motion in my mind even today. The sun was golden, and the shadows of the afternoon stretched across our small home. My mother was outside, hanging laundry. My siblings were at school. I was alone, bored, and curious. As I wandered into her room, something about that little metal box called out to me. When I opened it, I saw coins lying quietly at the bottom. My heart didn't race with guilt. Instead, it danced with excitement. I looked around. No one, not a sound. I reached in, picked up the coins, and quickly shut the box. The coins were warm in my palm, maybe because of my sweaty hands, or maybe because they now held the heat of a choice I had never made before. I ran to the small village shop at the corner of the street. It was a wooden shack with jars full of candies, cookies, and shiny snacks. That day, I felt like a king with the treasure in his hands. I bought everything my tiny heart desired: bright wrappers, sweet smells, crunchy bites. I returned home and waited near the window for my brother and sister to come back. As soon as they arrived, I took them to a quiet corner of the room, poured out the goodies like magic, and their faces lit up like Diwali lights. We laughed, we ate, and for a few minutes, it felt like the happiest day of my life. But then, between bites, my sister asked the question I hadn't prepared for. Where did you get all this from? I froze. My fingers stopped reaching for the candy. My laughter vanished. My heart pounded, but now with fear. I could have lied. I could have said someone gave it to me. I could have made up a story, but my father's voice echoed in my ears. Always speak the truth, even when it's hard. So I took a deep breath, looked down, and said, I took the coins from mother's cupboard. Silence followed. No shouting, no crying, just silence. My sister didn't say anything more. That evening, when my mother found out, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't even call me. She just kept quiet. But I saw her eyes, disappointed. Still, she waited for my father to return home. When he did, dusty and tired from work, she quietly told him what had happened. I stood in the corner, small and scared, expecting thunder. I imagined his voice rising, imagined punishment, imagined his disappointment hitting me like a storm. But instead, he looked at me with eyes that were calm but heavy. He walked over, knelt down, and placed a hand on my shoulder. My son, he said, I'm proud you told the truth. That matters more than the mistake you made. But remember, trust is like glass. Once it breaks, it's hard to fix. I was stunned. No punishment, just forgiveness. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, and I heard my father whisper to my mother in the other room, keep an eye on him. He's a good boy. But young hearts wander. Those words changed everything for me. From that day on, I never stole again. Not because I feared punishment, but because I couldn't bear the thought of breaking that trust again. I was just a little boy who had made a mistake, but my father had treated me like someone capable of change, someone worth believing in. That was the moment honesty was planted in my heart, not as a rule, but as a responsibility. As I grew older, that memory from my childhood stayed with me, like a quiet voice that whispered in the back of my mind. During the most unexpected moments, it became my compass, not because I was told to carry it, but because something about that day had carved itself deep into my character. In school, whenever I was tempted to cheat during an exam or peek at someone's paper, I would feel my heartbeat shift, and I would remember my father's eyes that day. They weren't filled with anger. They were filled with something far more powerful: belief that I would be better. That memory kept me in line, even when no one was watching. Years passed. I was 16 when I got my first part-time job at a local shop. It wasn't much, just sweeping floors, refilling shelves, helping customers, but it was my first taste of responsibility. One evening, as I was closing up, I found a wallet someone had left near the counter. It was thick, clearly full of cash. There was no one around, no cameras, no eyes, just me, a wallet, and a choice. My hand held it for a second longer than it should have. I could have easily slipped it into my bag, walked away, and no one would have ever known. But I would have known. I returned it to the manager the next morning. He looked surprised. He even asked, "You sure this isn't yours?" I just smiled and said, "No, sir. Someone must be looking for it." He patted me on the shoulder and said something I'll never forget. "Honesty like this is rare these days. Keep it." That one sentence reminded me again of who I was trying to be, not perfect, just honest. College came next, and life got harder. Choices weren't as simple. Pressures were different. Friends offered shortcuts. Cheating became smarter, and success became something people chased at any cost. I was tempted more than once, but I always pulled back, not out of fear, but out of memory. That one moment from my childhood still guided me. Once, during a group assignment, one of my teammates suggested copying an entire presentation from the internet. Everyone agreed. It was fast, easy, and would guarantee a good grade. But I said no. I worked on my part, honestly, even though it made me unpopular for a while. In the end, our professor somehow found out that parts of the project were plagiarized, but my section wasn't. He called me after class and said, "I can see who tried and who didn't. Good work." That little moment felt better than any grade ever could. Years later, I got married. My life became busier, more complicated. I had bills, a career, responsibilities, but the value of honesty only grew stronger. Then one day, everything came full circle. My own son, just 6 years old, came running to me with tear-filled eyes. He had broken a picture frame. He had been told not to touch it, but curiosity got the better of him. I knelt down and asked him what happened. He looked scared, hands shaking, but then he whispered, "I broke it, Papa. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." My heart melted. I saw myself in him, not the mistake, but the courage it took to admit it. I gently held his hand, looked into his eyes, and said the same words my father once told me. "I'm proud of you for telling the truth. That matters more than what you broke. But remember, trust is like glass. If you break it, it's hard to fix." He nodded, hugged me tightly, and I knew in that moment the lesson had been passed on. Not through punishment, not through fear, but through love and honesty. That night, I watched him sleep, and I remembered something my father had whispered to my mother after forgiving me. "Keep an eye on him. He's a good boy." But young hearts wander, and now, here I was, decades later, watching my own good boy, hoping that his heart too would find its way every time it wandered. Sometimes I wonder, what if I had lied that day? What if I had said I found the coins on the road? Maybe nothing would have happened. Maybe no one would have known. But I would have carried that lie like a shadow for the rest of my life. Instead, I carried something else. I carried the power of truth. And truth, I've learned, is not a weapon. It's not loud or dramatic. It's gentle, steady, silent. But it builds you, layer by layer, into someone even you can respect. And that is something no amount of money, success, or praise can replace. Today, whenever I make a hard decision, whenever I have to choose between what's easy and what's right, I think of that little boy with stolen coins in his hand, and the father who forgave him. I think of the day that changed everything, and I remind myself that truth is not just something you speak, it's something you live. So if you've ever made a mistake, if you've ever been scared to tell the truth, let me tell you, it's never too late. Never too late to choose honesty. Never too late to become the kind of person your younger self would be proud of. All it takes is one moment, one step, one truth. And from there, everything can begin again.